I'm delighted to have with me today as my guest Joe Casey, who is an executive coach. He is also an author. He's written How to Win the Retirement Game, and he's a podcaster who I have followed for a number of years. The Retirement Wisdom podcast is one that I highly recommend to my friends, and I recommend it, Joe, to younger friends, not just people that are actually in retirement. Is that a wise thing to do?
It's a very wise thing to do, only because we have three daughters. They're younger; they're in their 20s and 30s. And one of their friends told me, "I know what you're up to. Your podcast isn't about retirement; it's about life." And so a lot of their friends listen as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to keep recommending it. So the Retirement Wisdom podcast is out there available on all channels as far as I can tell. Before Joe got into executive coaching and the specialty of retirement, he was in the financial services sector. He spent a long career with Merrill Lynch. So he knows a lot about the financial services sector, and he also knows about some of the challenges that people in that space have dealing with business customers. The thesis, Joe, that I have is that a lot of business bankers are very adept at talking about the business side of the issues facing a business owner looking into the future, but sometimes shy away from talking about the personal kind of issues that a business owner might be facing. And I think part of that, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, is are business owners in general reluctant to get into this topic? Are they procrastinating themselves?
Well, it's a hard topic because it's one of those warm and fuzzy type things. It's not tangible, but it's really important. And I think I wouldn't want people to be coming to me for financial advice because that's not my background. But I think it's important to have expertise or a partner that you can refer people to provide that. But mainly because it's about things like identity. And it's about who someone is when they're running a business and who they might want to become after. And
Mhm.
that takes a particular type of expertise, I think, to help people think through that. But I think a lot of it's just procrastination in general. Every once in a while, we'll look at that side mirror in our car and say objects may be closer than they appear. And
Mhm.
that's often the case with retirement, particularly with business owners where their identity is so wrapped up in the business.
Yeah. So if you were trying to draw out, I know this is one of the things you do professionally in coaching people about their future plans and helping them design their futures. What kinds of things do you do to get them comfortable starting to talk about that?
I'm trained in a process that I use, which is not retirement specific, but it works extremely well with retirees, pre-retirees, and that's designing your life. It was created by two Stanford people, Dave Evans and Bill Burnett, and I'm one of their trained coaches. And what it does is it applies the principles of design thinking to planning careers in life. And I work with people thinking about the next 5 years
Mm-hmm.
after they move into the next phase. And what it does, it helps people bring imagination to the equation, and really think about their future, and not just in one way as we're used to a plan, but as you do in scenario planning, look at three alternative visions in the next 5 years. So you're starting to expand your horizons and taking a look at what really could be, what's
Mm-hmm.
possible. But before we do that, we spend time on, well, what matters most as you look at the next 5 years, because that
Mm-hmm.
list might shift a bit. Your values don't
Mm-hmm.
change usually, but your priorities do. And we want to get clear on what that is. And then we start looking at what's possible. And then the
Mm-hmm.
third phase is getting data by
Mm-hmm.
doing some research and testing some things before you take the plunge.
So the question to get somebody using their imagination that you just shared about what concerns you about the next 5 years, or in the case of maybe a younger entrepreneur, as they look farther into the future, is that a way to get people opening up?
Yes, and to really to take a look at what could be, but also try to look at what not only concerns but hopes. I think
Hmm.
the hopes can open you up, and the concerns can are realistic, and you need to focus on them. But what I notice is sometimes when people look at the next phase, the future, if you will, they look at what am I going to gain and what am I going to lose, and
Hmm.
they often don't look at it like they do the P&L in their business. They tend to look at one side. If they're thinking about the losses, which is common, the things they'll lose, identity, status, income, etc., it can blind them to what's really possible, the upside, the gains that are there. Conversely, if they're thinking about the gains, no alarm clock, nothing but golf, all the freedom in the world,
Mhm.
they can actually not pay as much attention to some of the real concerns that they have to do, which is mainly how am I going to invest my time, which might turn out to be the most precious resource of all.
Yeah, so I think in one of the segments of your book, which again I would highly recommend to folks, that the suggestion is that a lot of times people are much more comfortable with the money side of things than they are talking about the personal side of things, these hopes and dreams. Uh, is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. Look, the money is important. You have to get that nailed down first. But then the question is, what are you going to do? What's that other investment decision? How are you going to invest those years?
Mhm.
None of us have any guarantees, but you can figure out either yourself or with the help of tools or a financial advisor how much money you'll have, what the projections are, what the risk levels are, et cetera, et cetera. But we really don't know how much time we're going to have. My former employer, Merrill Lynch, had teamed up with AgeWave, Ken Dickwald's firm, for many years, and they did one study looking at how long it took people to figure out what they wanted to do next after they retired. And the answer was 2.5 years, which
Mhm.
doesn't sound like a long time to some people, but if you don't know how much time you have, it really is a different thing if you're wandering a bit before you really design that life you really want. So what we're trying to do with designing your life is get people to step back, think through what's most important, and then looking at a range of possibilities, think more broadly about the different versions of future you that could be.
Mhm. Mhm. So if you were giving advice, and I know that as a good coach, you may ask me a question about the question I'm actually posing, but if you were trying to give advice to bankers who again are pretty well versed in the business side of their customers' lives, but not so much on the personal side, what would you encourage them to do?
I would encourage them to start thinking about talking with people about to engage their curiosity about, well, let's talk about what comes next and just
Mhm.
gauge the reaction. They may be, well, I don't have time for that, et cetera, et cetera. But I said, well, let's just say, what would a typical Tuesday look like 3 years
Mhm.
after you do? What would be a great week? What would be a great day? Uh, Paint a picture for me about about a week that would be great. And one question I like to try to encourage them is, if I ran into you 3 years ago after you had sold the business or handed off, and I ran into you at a game or in the airport. I said, "How are things going?" And you said, "It's correct, great, they're terrific." Paint a picture for me of what that looks like. What would you have
Mhm.
done? What are you doing? What are you engaged in? How do you feel? Who are you then compared to who are you now? And that question might stun them at first, or they may, but it will get them thinking
Mhm.
about who that is. The other thing is, it's rarely a solo process, meaning there's someone in their life, spouse, partner, family members, etc., that they want to engage in those questions about. Let's fast forward 5 years after, and what's going to be look like, and then how did we get there? Let's reverse engineer it, but really to
Mhm.
look at that with someone else and the impact, because they have hopes and dreams and concerns as well.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Joe. And part of it is again helping people to think about the future in sort of a non-threatening way, uh, using the imagination, which can lead to some very hopefully some very thoughtful commentary then, but then down the road. These are conversations that are going to continue, particularly if you're involving the spouse or significant people in the family. One of the things that in a lot of family owned businesses is almost assumed is that the people, the next generation is going to want to take on the business. That's not always correct, and people have to make darn sure that they're actually verifying that. So, so is there anything that you would recommend? I touted your podcast. I think I've touted your book. Anything else that you would recommend that might be helpful as resources for bankers?
Sure, a couple of things. One is getting a sense of who people can talk with in their lives, because we just don't want to stay just in imagination. This isn't really
Mhm.
about a vision board or staying
Mhm.
up in the sky, the cloud, so to speak. But who can they talk to about what it's really like? So other people have retired successfully. I learned that
Mhm.
from one of my clients who came back and said, I talked to 5 people who were retired and they all hate it. And I said, well, let's revise the question. Who do you know who's thriving in retirement?
Mhm.
Who really can tell you what it was like? And you can get a picture. So you want to balance that out. In terms of resources, there are 3 books I'd recommend. The first is by four authors, but the lead one is Harvard Business School professor Teresa Amabile, and she just retired about a year and a half ago. I actually did a program with her 2 weeks ago and one on Friday with Cal Berkeley. The first one was with 1,000 professors. This Cal Berkeley one was a discussion group as a follow-up. But she co-wrote a book called Retiring, Creating a Life That Works for You. And she wrote it with four of her academic colleagues. But here's why it's the number one thing I recommend. They did 10 years of research. They focused on a large group of people, but then they zeroed in on 14 in particular. And they have a very simple process called life maps. You draw a picture of your life today on one page, and then the second page or second half of the page, you draw a picture of what it's going to be like when you retire. Mm-hmm. And you get to see them in the book. They have so many variations people came up with. But it really gives you a sense of what's the center. Currently, the business may be at the center. What's going to be at the center 5 years out? Mm-hmm. And that helps quite a bit. But I think that's the number one, retiring, creating a life that works for you. And she was on my podcast, and she has been on a lot of the other Harvard podcasts. That's very useful. You can find her speaking about it. She also identified 4 developmental tasks, almost phases that you go through, that everyone goes through. They're different for everyone in terms of the duration, but it's a good framework to think about it. Number 1 is making the decision to retire. Number 2 is detaching from work, not just administratively, financially, but psychologically. Back to that identity question again. Mm-hmm. And then 3rd is very similar to designing your life, experimenting, trying out a new way of living. And then 4th is synthesizing it, pulling that together in an ongoing way. So that's the first one. It's not a heavy read. It's based on research, but it's not technical at all. The second one is an easy read, and a book that came out in 2015. It's by Ken Blanchard. He had a co-author, a researcher, Morton Shavitz, and it's called Refire or Don't Retire. And what's great about it is Blanchard's a master storyteller. He wrote 1 Minute Manager, all those books. Mm-hmm. And he teamed up with a researcher who really gets it. So they tell a story of this couple of retires and the journey of the go through it. And there's a lot of very practical things, lessons in there, including one I'll just share. I mentioned in my book because I found it so valuable. Blanchard created something called the Serendipity Club. And that was on Friday. There's only one rule. You can't say no. And on Friday afternoon, you get the call. We're going out to dinner. New restaurant, new type of food. And you had to say yes. And I shared a story in my book where I was walking down the street in Washington, D.C., where I'm off to later today, with our daughter who was going to school at the time. And she said, where do you want to go for dinner? And I rattled off the 3 favorite places we always like to go. And so, well, actually, now I'd like to try this Ethiopian restaurant, Das, Georgetown. I said, well, I'm not really in the mood for that. There's something new. And I literally stopped physically because I said, oh, the Serendipity Club. I have to say yes. So we've been there 5 times. It's my favorite Ethiopian restaurant now. And she actually and her husband are in Ethiopia as we speak. They're on a 2-year assignment with the U.S. government. So, but that's an example. Practical things you can use to really, and that one emphasized novelty, which is really important. What are you open to doing something new? Mm-hmm. And the third one is a woman, Joanne Lippman, who wrote a book called Next. And it's about reinvention. It's not retirement specific only, but it's about any transition in life. And she used to be a editor of the Wall Street Journal, Weekend Magazine. She was editor-in-chief at USA Today. And she interviewed a ton of people and really came up with, again, a four-stage process, which seems to be common here, to manage that. So those are the 3 I'd recommend: retiring, creating a life that works for you; retire, don't refire; or refire, don't retire; and 3rd, Next by Joanne Lippman.
That's great. Those sound like great resources. I guess the other thing that strikes me based on our conversation is that bankers who are trying to help their clients also ought to think about adding to their network someone who does specific advising on retirement planning, somebody who would bring insights and perhaps a process to the table. What would you look for if you were a banker trying to find somebody like that?
So I would look for someone who you can get recommendations from clients, so you can really kick the tires as you would in hiring a financial advisor. But number one, that's number one. Number 2, someone who's well trained. There are a lot of people in this space who, frankly, are not well trained. There are people in retirement coaching who figured out a long time ago that there's more money to be made in training retirement coaches than actually doing the
Mm-hmm.
coaching itself. So I would look for someone who has a strong background training and has a philosophy that they can articulate and that's based in something other than than a 2-week course. So I think that's the big thing. So you want someone who trained, knows what they're doing, and has client referrals or recommendations that can back that up.
Joe, thanks very much for being part of this NedTalks. I think there are a lot of good takeaways, and we'll include some of the references to the books that you mentioned. But I think the major takeaway for me is the importance of planning your life and thinking about the futures that might be helpful. And if a banker is able to help his or her clients in that area begin the thought process, I think it's going to be to everyone's benefit. So thanks for sharing your thoughts. Please go ahead.
One last thing, just listening to you, it really comes down to the planning that they put in to grow their business. Now applying that to life. You don't want to plan well for one side and then wing it on the other.
Good advice. Again, thanks, Joe, for being part of this NedTalks.